evening, everyone. So, welcome to What It Takes to Impress in a New Job. This is the final event for this academic year in the What It Takes Alumni Speaking event, which is organised by the Alumni Relations team. So my name is Jennifer. I'm one of the mentors here, and also one of your honorary alumni. I actually graduated from King's College, University of London, and since I graduated, since the early 2000s, I've been in the pharmaceutical industry space. So part of my role has been developing teams, leading teams, and so developing high-performing teams. So I've interviewed grads like yourself, reviewed your CVs, and managed as well. So one of my passions is to develop and see people thrive in their role. And that's one of the reasons I actually started Kavak, which is a platform to help grads like yourself succeed in their role. So that's me, a very brief introduction there. So let's start with some housekeeping before we get started. So this event has been recorded, and the recording will be available at the Alumni YouTube channel in the next weeks. If you hear the fire alarm, please calmly leave and just take what you have within reach and go through those doors behind me there. And the assembly point is on Milton Place, which is at the opposite side of the building on the main at the main entrance. So these are the panels. I'm going to be introducing them in a moment, but the conversation today is about the discussion of having your experience in your new job, and they're going to share their advice of the best way to actually impress when you start a new job. So, and there will be question and answers at the end, so you have a chance to ask questions, and there'll be refreshments afterwards. So that's just a quick introduction. So I'm going to introduce the panel in a moment. So, to our panelists, what we're going to do is just to find out your journey from when you left Westminster until now. So I'm going to be asking each of you just to tell us, basically, when you graduated, what you did when you graduated, and what you're doing now. Okay, just so that people have a sense of your story and your journey from when you left university and now. So I'm going to start off with Carmen. Michelle. Hello. Hello. So if you could just tell us what you studied at Westminster, when you graduated, and what you're doing now.
Okay, so I studied computer games development. I graduated in 2022, and after graduating, I went on doing software engineering in a games company, and that's where I am right now, which is today.
Okay, thank you. And next we're going to go to Favor Ikwengu.
Hi, I'm Favor Ikwengu. I studied business information systems. I graduated last year, and I started as a QEA, quality engineering assurance tester, in a tech consultant company.
Thank you. And then next we're going to go to Mohammed. You're at the end.
Hi guys, I'm Mohammed. I graduated in 2022 and I studied business management, digital business. I also worked at the Westminster Enterprise Network in my final year. And following graduating, I worked as a graduate trainee in the digital performance marketing at 4 agencies worldwide. And I currently work as a digital performance executive at the same company as well.
Thank you. And last but not least, Rajan.
Hi, I'm Rajan. I graduated in 2020. I did computer science, and then after I graduated, I got a graduate program role as a full stack engineer. I was there for about 18 months, and then after that I left, and now I'm at Innovative Systems as an intermediate software support analyst.
Okay, thank you. So all our panelists, everyone. Okay. So I do apologise, I did beg your pardon, my error. So that's Gabby.
Hi, I'm Gabby Villa, and I studied marketing management at the Marylebone campus. I graduated in July 2023, and then afterwards I worked at Sky during the summer as a marketing executive, and then afterwards from October I've been working at Procter & Gamble as a marketing executive as well.
Thank you so much, Gabby. Thank you. So I'm actually going to start with you, my first question. I didn't mean to overlook you. So the first question is, we're going to put the questions to you. So the first question is, during the first 90 days of starting your new job, after you graduated, how did you feel that you kind of grasped the job description and your employer's expectation? Maybe just share with us.
So I'll kind of go into two sections for this question because I did have two roles. So for my first role over the summer, I made sure that I was really equipped with what was required of the role and responsibilities in my new job as a marketing executive at Sky. And I had those conversations in my first week with my manager outlining what was required, what was my development journey going to be like in this company, and thereon we sort of made a plan. Thereon from that company, I then joined Procter & Gamble in October, and this was a little bit more fast-paced for me. It was a very dynamic company, and there's a very clear development structure there. So as soon as I joined, I was told I had a lot of training to do. I had to learn lots of software, internal processes I had to learn, and then also they put me straight onto their development program, which is a year's worth of basically developing you in your skills and being able to meet those goals so that you can meet the promotion at the end of the year. So that's what I'm currently on, and those conversations happened in my one-to-one every single week with my manager. We outlined what I'm working on, what I'd like to develop, and what I'd like to get out of my journey here at Procter & Gamble.
Okay, so what advice would you give to your peers? Because it sounds like you sort of proactively had that conversation with your manager. What advice would you give them to impress the employer?
So in terms of advice, I would definitely say be really clear with what you'd like to get out of your first role after graduating. Of course, you want exposure in the industry and your role, but at the same time, you want to get out what you can from it. So be it if you have any personal skills that you want to exercise there, or that if there are any areas that you're really interested in, I would definitely make it as clear as possible with your manager in the first month or so. It's very, of course, very dynamic and bold of you, but it's really good so that you can have transparency with your manager and they know where you would like to go. So it's no surprise at the end of the year when it comes to your conversations about promotions and where you'd like to go next. So definitely, be really confident in where you'd like to go.
Thank you for that. So I want you to share your experience, Ava. Just the same question. How would you? Oh, you've got my there, so just hold that there. So the question is, the first 90 days of starting your role, how much did you grasp your job description and what your individual contribution was to your role? How much of that did you grasp in the first 3 months?
For me, it was slightly different from Nadia because it was different from what I
Can you guys hear her? Is that right? Okay.
It was the job role I was getting into was so different from what I studied, and I was basically learning the programming language within the role. So within the first 90 days, it was, I'd say chaotic for me because it was a new learning environment and I've never worked in a consulting company before or in any global company like that. So I felt like a tiny midget in such a vast environment, and for me within the first 90 days it was learning my environment, and my company was great for graduates like me because they learned us by the hands for the first 2 months. So we didn't do anything but learn the skill that you didn't have. So for me, I kind of learned what my role was prior to the job, but when I was in the job, I just realized it's so different from what I've prepped myself for. So I learned within the job, I spoke to my line manager what skill I required for the role, and from there, I spoke to my development manager, who helped me set myself up for success within the next 90 days. So I kind of started participating in the training that was allocated for us, and I developed certain skills which was required for the project I needed. So that kind of helped a lot. It helped a lot for me. And for me, I also had what we call a go perform with your manager. So every 6 months, you have to set up a performance goal and a development plan for yourself. I did have my manager where he will say, okay, within the first quarter, I'd like you to complete this, this, and this, and I'd like you to write a KT on what you've learned, so I can understand that you're capable of achieving that. And from there, I kind of it made me not feel laid back, but actually learn the application so I can be able to teach it to another person that might be in my shoes. So for me, I learned quite a lot, and I'm able to work in kind of 2 projects as a manual tester.
Okay.
A bit confident.
Okay. So when you say chaotic, can you kind of expand a little bit what that was like for you when you said it was chaotic? Was it just busy, or was it just you trying to find your feet?
It was me trying to find my place.
Okay.
I felt like, let me give you an example.
Okay,
So
sure.
I'm from a different background. So the role that I went into was majorly software engineering, computer
Right.
science. I was learning, I was in a learning environment that I was very uncomfortable with. I would say extremely uncomfortable because coding is not my strongest suit. I'm not into it. I thought I would get a role I would code, but this role required a heavy amount of coding. So for me, it felt like the mat has been taken off my feet. So I was kind of like drowning for the first 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks within my training. I was so behind within learning, and with the helping hand of the team that they set up for me, I was able to grasp that and navigate my way through it.
That's great. So what advice would you give to your peers who would find themselves in a role that they didn't expect, something similar to you? What advice would you give to them?
Advice I would give to them is don't panic.
There you go.
That's the first one. Don't feel like you're an imposter. Because at one point, there was always someone like you at that stage. And people that I was in training with, because they did computer, I thought they would know so much better than me. And because I was very open in discussing my struggles with it, thinking I would get help as well, the environment was like we were all on the same level, we were all struggling together, so you're not alone. So I would say be very vocal to your peers, to your colleagues within the industry and to your managers as well. That way you can get the help that you need, because keeping silent will not do you any good.
Okay, thank you so much. What's your experience, Mohammed?
Yeah. So the industry that I, of course, went into was marketing. So I was working a lot with Google Ads, different social media ad managers, so like Facebook ads, TikTok ads, and whatnot. And that was completely new to me. So that was like a completely new experience. I had no experience working with any of those ad managers before. However, one thing that I did do at the start of my role was to have a really, strong relation with the manager. So I worked really closely with my manager in terms of understanding the different aspects of the role, how to, manage a campaign, how to, understand and optimize a campaign. And one of the ways I did that was, through reporting, for example. One of the beginner tasks that we do in a role, and doing the first few steps of the role really allowed me to understand how I can understand all of the different stages of actually developing a skill. So that was really important. Of course, another thing is one of the key quotes that I saw and has stuck with me is that one of the entries of success is embarrassment. So it doesn't matter if you feel like an imposter or if you feel like you don't know anything. Everyone's in that position at the start. So like no one has experience at the start. They always develop their skills. So embarrassment is like an entry to success. So always remember that.
Thank you so much. So we're going to go to Adam and then come to you.
So I would say my experience was slightly different because with the graduate role I had different rotations. So each rotation was a new job for me. So I started off doing testing for Home Office, which I'd never done before, but it was I had to just learn as I was going on. So I was working with another tester, which was showing me the ropes of how to do things, and then it was more or less me in the deep end trying to then figure everything out, make those mistakes, and then sort of move forward with that. But it was on my side of if I wanted to move on to another location.
Right.
So I think I did about a month or two there, and then this is not for me, this is not where I want to take my career. So then I moved on and I got another rotation as a BA. So I was a lead BA doing all the processes for HMRC because we just won some work. So I completed that rotation and I was still in my head, I can't see myself being a BA moving forward. But I knew that I wanted to do like DevOps engineer, Azure stuff. So in the meantime, I started doing like certifications and stuff on the side because I knew that's the way I wanted to take my career. And I had those conversations with my manager saying that these rotations are great, but it's not where I want to go. So then in my final rotation, I got a DevOps engineer sort of role where I could put the skills and experience that I gained on the side and put that into practice. So that way it was more of like, learn on the job, make those mistakes, ask those questions, and then also trying to figure out like, what do you actually want to do, and then get that rotation at the end. But for me, the company structure and stuff like that, it wasn't sitting well with me.
Right.
So that's why I had to move out of that situation to an organization where I'm just working for the organization, not like working for different organizations within one. So yeah.
Okay. So within your current role, you understand what your unique contribution is.
Yes.
Okay.
So I know like the value that I provide to our customers.
That's
and
great.
how the organization sort of works. I feel more part of the team and
That's great.
you know, I have that sort of contribution to the success of the company.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing your experience. And last but not least.
Yeah. I actually, my first experience with the job I'm in right now was in 2019 when I did three-month internship actually to this company, and then I went back to do a placement, and then after my last year I went back to actually just do the job. So I had kind of three beginnings, I would say. So I was thinking back how did I do in each one of them, and I think what I've learned was that yourself, you can't fully know you're doing well until you kind of ask people around. So I would say asking your manager quite constantly in your one-on-one, like to give feedback, to kind of grasp if you're doing well from their perspective, because you could think you're doing well, but maybe you can improve on certain things you didn't see before someone tells you or points out. I think it was quite interesting because in the first internship I worked quite alone, programming but also designing a piece of a feature in the game. But then later on I joined in a team, so we worked on still feature, not live games. But it was very interesting to see the difference between just working with yourself for a company, right? Just my own project, and then working with other people and coordinating, make sure that the planning is right and done right, and the delivery is gonna happen, basically.
Thank you so much. So it sounds like everyone, or just listening to all of you, you kind of took the proactive step to speak to your manager to understand what your role is and just to know what your contribution would be, which is great. When I started, I was so scared. I really didn't understand what I was actually supposed to do. So I just want to say that if you are starting a new job or a new role, it's so important to understand your job description. It's really important to understand what that KPI is, what that key performance indicator, what exactly are you bringing, what value are you adding. And so what I do say to my direct reports or to my mentees is to really understand your job description and to know who your stakeholders are, who are the people that you're going to be kind of liaising with, and really start to kind of build that relationship with them. And if you start to do that, and you mentioned very clearly about feedback and getting feedback, and just getting into the practice of getting feedback is so important, and that way will make you be noticeable, I would say, and will make you shine, and that would be something that will make you stand out. So hopefully that was helpful. So thank you all of you for that, your experience. So we're going to go to the next question, which talks about challenges. I know you mentioned about being chaotic, but let's just talk about sort of what challenges or surprises did you encounter? If you kind of take yourself back from day one, when you walked into that office and you started to find your feet, what challenges or surprises did you encounter? And how did you overcome them to kind of regain your confidence? Let's start with you, Mohammed. If you could share your experience, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I would say that one of
would say one of the challenges was that in terms of the responsibility that I had, they did, put a lot of responsibility. For example, one of the responsibilities was to work with really large budgets. Budgets of up to £5,000, £10,000 sometimes on a monthly basis, and I had to manage those budgets sometimes as well. So having that responsibility was a big surprise. However, that constant catch-ups and whatnot with my manager was really effective in terms of overcoming that challenge. But in terms of the responsibility, you can experience being put into the deep end in your role. However, in order to overcome those challenges, you just need to work really closely with your managers. If you do have, for example, a hybrid job, it would be really important to go into the office and work with your colleagues as well, because that way, you'll be able to ask your colleagues in person, and they'll be able to, they can guide you on how to resolve the issues, how to overcome the challenge and the task. So that would be one advice I'd give as well.
Okay, and that's how you overcame those challenges? It's just to work closely with your manager and your colleagues?
Yeah. So one of the ways was, just to work as closely as possible with my managers, as well as, just go into the office and work with my colleagues, get some advice from them, learn from them as well as ask for training sessions. That was one of the main things that I asked for. Asking for training sessions from my manager to teach me, how do you do this, how do you do that, and that way I was able to learn a lot.
Thank you. Finn, what was your experience?
So the mic might be a bit too low. There might be a button on there just to press to make it work.
It's flashing red and green. Is that helpful?
Is that testing?
Is that better? Just worry.
Hi. Alongside me getting used to my new job, it was, when it's a global company, it's getting used to the vast environment. Because my company is a flat down structure, which means that you can speak to the CEO, you can speak to the vice, with the VP. So my company had a lot of get-togethers. For me, I had a big issue with how do I connect to someone higher up? How do I make a connection? How do I become friends with them? How do I get to know their interests and be a part of that as well? Because for me, it's what do I have to offer? For me, I'm a young adult, young graduate that is meeting someone who has over probably 30 years of experience. For me, it was I felt that difference, and I couldn't understand it. So along this past 6 months, I learned how to make that connection. Like he said, going in was one of them. For me, learning about who I wanted to connect with was very important. I think I did a lot of research of, Durham teams, what do they do? What are they under? What country are they from? I did an analysis of what likely are they going to be into, and then I'll make up discussions starting from the little TED talk, what's the weather like over there? Where are you from? Because I collaborated with a lot of international countries as well. So even though I'm speaking to higher up, I'm speaking to someone who's all the way in India, or speak to someone all the way in America. So I needed to know who I was speaking to and then navigate there. That was one. Another one I would say was working within a project. So basically, let me give you an example. I work with a tech company that collaborates with clients from other companies. So for me, it's I'm not going to work with this company. I'm going to be in another office for another 6 months. So that means I'm no longer in my main company. I'm now, for example, in a pharmaceutical company. That means I'm learning about the application. It's a whole different environment. So that was a massive change for me. So within that, I learned not to be too attached to a company, because I got so attached to my normal company that I was thinking, okay, I have to make a new impression. So for me, it's learning to form relationships, and at the back of my mind knowing that I can also build a relationship, and learning from there, navigating, making connections that might be helpful in the future, and keeping hold of that. So did I answer that question?
You did, that's your experience, thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things that I experience and I see as well in new grads is that at the very beginning there's this feeling of, like you rightly say, how when you see somebody more senior with a big title, there's a little bit of intimidation there. And in the workplace, one of the reasons that people tend to get insecure is it's an experience thing. It's like you come in, you don't have much experience with the people that are there, and you feel a little bit insecure. But, as somebody said here, that everyone started somewhere, and everyone starts to get that experience. But one of the things that really, really sometimes knocks confidence, and it certainly did for me when I was starting out, is that feedback and just really having that sort of lack of confidence in when my manager tells me something that I needed to change, or I just felt that really did knock my confidence actually. But that's something we might come and talk about. But yeah, that was something I experienced as well. It's a bit of a shock because when you're at university, you're in this bubble, and then suddenly you're in this environment that's very structured with very senior people. That is how do you navigate that? But thanks for sharing the experience. So I can definitely resonate there as well. So let me move the mic. So maybe we can start with you, Carmen.
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges I had was moving from personal projects and group projects to AAA game code base. It was quite overwhelming, and at the beginning I didn't know really where to begin with, even just to look around stuff. But also when I would start getting tasks, I wouldn't know really where to look first. Where do I start? Where do I begin with this stuff? So what helped me was just being in contact with my close colleagues, kind of asking for guidance. Where do I start? Just give me a file where I can look, and then I can take it from there. And another thing that was not surprising, obviously, but it was just clashing personalities with just people at work. In my first internship, it was just like after my first year of uni, I was very bubbly, talking to everyone. But later on, I met new people, more people, and then slowly I found myself in a situation where I don't really like that person. I work with them. What do I do? So again, I kind of turned to my manager and said, hey, I've experienced this with this person. I'm not that comfortable. What do you think I should do? In work situations, people go to HR, but it wasn't my case. So we just kind of discussed how to diplomatically handle it, and then that was there.
Okay, thank you for sharing your experience. Gabby?
So in terms of challenges, I would say there were two challenges which stick out to me. The first one isn't really a challenge, it's more of a positive, but it's something to think about, and it's culture in the company. So that's something that I personally didn't put at the forefront of my decision making when I first started a new job in the summer. And I actually think that it's really challenging to get to know what a culture is like unless you are actually in the company itself, because that's when you get to know what the rhythm is, what people are like to work with, and how decisions are made. And you can't really know that until you're there. You can try and do your outside research on LinkedIn and try and get as much external information as you can, but it can be challenging once you're there if you're not quite sure if you like it. So challenges in culture for me was something that I had to overcome. And then I moved to a new job at Procter & Gamble, and it's a very different culture. So I also did a placement year at Samsung, and during that time, it was a dynamic company with a hierarchical structure. And it was completely different to the company which I'm at the moment, which is very dynamic as well, but in a very different type of way. So I've had to relearn how to work in a way. Even though I have experience in marketing, I've still had to go from step one and understand how do people work, how do they interact, how are decisions made, and what is the kind of flow, and I guess going back to KPIs, how does it all tie in together? So that's the first challenge for me. And the second challenge is internal learning. So of course you've got your external learning that you can keep up with, but internal learning is so integral. So For me, when I started Procter & Gamble, there was a lot of learning that I had to do, and I actually had to complete an internal qualification. And I was so overwhelmed at the beginning, but I knew this is something I have to do, and I have to overcome this fear, and I have to focus. And I did actually get to the end of it. It was very intense at the time, but it was definitely setting those goals, making those trackers, making sure you're on track, because you've got this opportunity as a graduate to really learn as much as you can, and there are very, very few roles available at the moment as a graduate. So just being enthusiastic and taking on those challenges is going to make you such a better person in the workplace afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. So, why don't you see James? Oh, you got one there.
I would say one of the challenges that I faced was that obviously once you enter a new role, you have all these questions of like, how am I going to even do this job? Obviously they see something in you to give you the job, but then it's like, how are you going to now meet their expectations of like, in my sort of role, it's like, how am I going to learn this software? How am I going to help our clients sort of resolve their issues, being on a call with a customer that's got like a P1 saying, this is not working right and I'm new to the company, how am I going to deal with those sort of situations? But I started off doing like shadowing my other colleagues of how they sort of approach a particular case, how they approach an escalation, and sort of based on that I learned how to deal with those difficult situations, difficult clients. And by then, after that, I was doing like simple calls on my own, where I built that sort of confidence. And now I'm at a stage where I can take an escalation, or I can take a P1. So you do see your journey from when you start to where you are now, but it's taking those small steps that will help you get to where you want to be.
Yeah. So what advice would you give any of your peers of how you kind of overcame that initial challenge that you just mentioned?
So I would say that, put yourself out there, really sort of integrate within your team and show that willingness to learn. I think it's quite important, and ask questions, because if you don't ask, you won't learn. So whatever sort of situation you're in, if you don't know, don't be silent. Ask it. It's never a stupid question.
Yeah. I agree, 100%, yeah. Thank you all for sharing experiences. And I just wanted to say, when we talk about culture, we're talking about people. People make the culture. So in your example of having the clash of personality, sometimes you can't avoid it, because not everybody would be you're not going to gel with everyone. But when you're in that environment, that bubble called the professional world, there's an expectation there to kind of get along with people. So when you have your interview and you've been given a job, they don't see how you get on with people. That's the part that they don't see. And they only go by what you tell them at the interview. So once you're in the role, because the interview and the fact that you've performed extremely well and you've gotten the role, it's a really kind of a foundation, and you have to build on top of that. And then they start to observe. So going back to your point about the clash of personality, it's so common. I experienced that too. But it kind of came down to communication skills. And that's such a broad subject. It's a really broad subject. There's lots of materials out there to really help. I'm still developing mine, you never stop. But when employers say good communication skill, there's a lot of layers to that. There's a lot more deep than just good communication skills. It's like asking questions, speaking up when you're really struggling, and not being afraid to ask the question. Like you said, there's no silly questions. And just ask because you really need to know. And when you're in that role, employees don't really expect you to come in and change things. They don't really expect you to change things in the first 3 months. They just want that willingness to learn, as you mentioned, and being open to learn. And also saying, I don't know. And it's okay to say you don't know. But we've seen with some of the observations, as we see a lot of grads come in, and not everyone is all out there. Some people are very shy, and that's fine. But it's really kind of seeing that employers really want you to ask the questions. So thank you. So when I talk about communication, I always mention 3 C's. There are 3 C's. One is clarity, confidence, and calm. And the clarity has been very clear about what you're saying, and just making sure the information that you're conveying is clear. And the confidence comes from what you know, what you don't know, and that's fine. But also the way you project yourself, your voice, your eye contact, and your tone. But calmness is what diffuses tension. I think that's the main thing. It's just, there's no need to hurry. It's just being calm. So I always think about those 3 C's when you're communicating. Am I being clear? Am I being confident? And am I being calm? And that calmness just kind of puts an end to any kind of tension. But it's just the world of work, and we have to work with the people we don't necessarily like, but we have to work with them. So thank you guys for sharing that. So just going on to the next question that I'm going to, and I'm going to probably start with you, Roger. Okay. So how did you sort of communicate your ideas in that sort of early stage of the task that was assigned to you, being a junior employee? How did you communicate, being around people with more experience, the kind of courage to be able to say, I've got an idea?
I think we had sort of like an open floor sort of communication there. So like in my one-to-ones, I'll bring up my ideas saying, you know, I suggest this, or maybe can we do this? So things like that, like for feedback, I would suggest to my manager. But also we would have like team meetings, because we're EMEA-based, so that we were working with people in America or Mexico and things like that. So we would all have a meeting together, and our manager would be like, okay, what do you guys think about this? So it was mostly like quite open for us to give that feedback. It wasn't that difficult. But I do know, like in my previous job, it was quite difficult because to give that feedback, because everyone had their set ways.
Wow.
So it was like being a new graduate, you have different ideas, but then they weren't willing to sort of adapt to those ideas. So then it becomes like a barrier of, okay, you've got this idea, but you just want to stick with your idea and not consider everyone else's opinion about it, and then mutually come up with an idea. So again, it's quite different in both sections, but yeah, where I work now, it's much more open floor of they're willing to change, which is a nice way of working.
Okay, so it sounds like you had the experience where the idea was based on seniority or something,
Yeah.
and then now you're in a place where there's a lot more flat structure. You have the chance, they include you in making decisions. Okay. So what advice would you give to anyone who was in your first experience who?
I would say, like, obviously, if they are shutting down your ideas, you shouldn't stop sort of giving that feedback, because at the end of the day, it's where you work. You should have the right to, you know, voice your opinions, even if they don't take them on board. So I wouldn't sort of move yourself back from that situation. I would always continue raising, you know, your ideas, because at the end of the day, that's, you know, something that you have. So yeah, continue doing that, and yeah, just see how it goes. Really.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that's a good practice.
Yeah.
To say, I have an idea, and if they don't take your idea on board, don't take it personally.
Yeah.
So just get into the habit of asking and putting your ideas forward. Thank you for sharing experience. And what about you, Gabby? Just do it that way.
So, interesting question, because in terms of ideas, I think that it starts a long time before you join the company. For me, I did a career change previously, so I was doing music before, and then I came to university, and then that's when the sort of enthusiasm for ideas started. So I think putting yourself, now that some of your students, so putting yourself out there and doing as much as you can, extracurricular activities like competitions and public speaking and societies, those are where you can form all your ideas, and you can take that enthusiasm and take it to your first job once you graduate. So I think the work has to be done whilst you're a student, so that you're prepared for the type of environments that you're going to be in once you're in the role, because it's going to be quite competitive, and there may be times, as you said, where you've got to cut through the noise, or you may have to take a step back and listen, and maybe take on the fact that maybe your idea isn't the best idea, and then bounce off other people's ideas. So I think it's a lot of learning, but you've got to start, I would say, pre-role, whilst you're a student, to try and bounce off your peers and colleagues, and try and use those skills now so that you're ready once you start your role.
That's great. Well done. Thank you. That's great. And you, Carmen?
So for my line of work, it's obviously starting from the designer of the game, going to the project manager, deciding, kind of refining the designer's idea, deciding what we're doing, when we're doing, ideas usually about the work I'm doing come as I'm doing the job, right? So I got a task at some point, and I came across a part of the code where something was just fishy. I didn't like it, and I really strongly believe that that code needed refactoring. So what I've done, I tried to be clear, as you said earlier, about communication. So I stated in an email the issue I was facing, what I was trying to do, and what I couldn't achieve with what we had. And then I came up with solutions and kind of a plan. I've structured it into small tasks, kind of describing vaguely for the stakeholders what actually needs to be done. And then I kind of wrote a bit what would happen if we don't do this. So could be implications later on when we launch the game, or it can be a bug that comes from this when we are live, and then we need to fix it right there and then. But this issue was a bit bigger, and we needed more time to do it. So I sent that email, and I've actually got support, and they put the team together, and I kind of lead it from the code perspective to do that refactor. And yeah, it's now in the game, so I'm quite
That's great. That's really great. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Faber, what's been your experience?
My company encourages you sharing ideas, especially within the project, and within my role, because we're always testing the system, so our idea is to break the system, find flaw within the system. And when you're breaking the system, sometimes you're thinking, how can the system be better for users? How can it be more easy to navigate or more user-friendly? So for me, when you're having your sprint meeting, so you have every morning, you have your meeting where you just be like, what went well, what you're struggling with. There you can bring up, I found a fault and I think we should do this. And your manager will be like, okay, I'll look into it. And then from there you can have a one-to-one, and generally they'll listen to you. Sometimes you feel like, I don't think my idea is like anything. But because you're also a user of the system, they will have to take your idea into consideration, because another user outside of you might experience that issue. So for me, that was it.
Yeah. So when you have that kind of niggling thought in your mind that, I don't know if this idea is going to be good, I'm not sure if I should say it, what makes you actually give the idea anyway? What makes you go past that in your mind, saying, I don't know if it's going to be a good idea?
I believe that, actually it was my company actually.
Okay.
My company at the start, they made us watch a lot of videos, and the induction was all about talking, giving feedback, that we're a company that's all about innovation. Innovation is part of our business, is the key actually to business. And without innovation from the employees, there is not going to be growth. So for me, that was like, it triggered some sort of, I want to be an asset to the company sort of ways. So when you start off, you start thinking with the thought of, what can you bring into the company? And from there, if you're outside or doing certain things, you're going to be like, that's a great idea. Maybe I can suggest it to my manager. And outside of your role as well, there is a part of my company where you can put your idea into this anonymous thing, and then if your idea gets picked and they say it's great enough, from there you can actually develop it into a massive idea and make a lot more contribution, which is amazing.
Yeah. So it sounds like it kind of comes down to the company, the culture, how they empower you to make decisions. But when you think of somebody who is in a company where they don't really give you that empowerment and you're shy, I think just listening to all of you is you ask anyway, you give your ideas anyway, and that's something that I think people can take away from this, that it doesn't matter. And I always say to people that just push past that fear that says, what do you know? Just push past that fear, or that look that says, you should know this by now, Just push past that fear and ask anyway, because you'll feel so much better for it, and it's a practice, and then you start to get better. Thank you for sharing that. Mohammed, can you share experience, please?
Yeah. So I think in my role, a lot of the time we do like optimizations, so like changes to the campaign, improving a ad campaign, and making changes to ensure that there's growth in a campaign. And I think Eva mentioned a really good word, and that's growth. So like putting forward your ideas would really lead to the company to grow even better, especially for like a single campaign, for example. So putting forward your ideas could be really beneficial, even if it's not the right idea. That's putting forward that idea shows that you're enthusiastic, shows that you're willing to learn and putting forward your ideas. So you definitely make a really strong first impression. So like putting forward your ideas, like your managers and your colleagues will catch on and will be like, he's really enthusiastic, or he's got really good ideas. So that's one really big thing as well. I think another thing would be like making logical ideas as well. So like whatever you learn in the role, putting together logic as well as the idea, that would be really good as well, because in terms of putting those two things together, you can actually, the more likely the idea will be accepted, and you can actually implement it as well. So in my role, there's a lot of those kind of ideas, like they're always encouraged on a daily basis because of all the optimizations and to make the campaign a success. And I think one other thing would be, when you show that you're enthusiastic for ideas, for example, you can branch into different areas of the company as well. So in my company, they're really reluctant on new business, on like, getting new clients and whatnot. So what I did was that I myself, just reached out to a few employers, went to networking events and whatnot, had a few contacts, and they got in touch with me. And what I did was that I just put together a deck for that new business, and getting the trends and whatnot. And when I delivered that to my manager and director, they were they saw that okay, he's got really good ideas, and it just puts a really good impression of you, and you really stand out from the crowd. You really stand out and get that promotion much quicker as well.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. So the general consensus is really share your ideas. Obviously, when you start from day one, and you're starting to get used to the company, what employers really want is the willingness to learn and just have the observant role and just observe and just taking everything in. And when you feel like you know and then you start to put ideas with it. I have this idea. So I think it's really key. So I think we're all on the same page here, is to share your ideas anyway. All right, I think we're doing okay for time. And just one last question I had, which is to do with building positive working relationships. And so what action and what sort of actions have you taken? Think back the first 3 months to really build. I think I've heard a lot. I spoke to my manager. I've got a good relationship with my manager. But beyond that, your team and the people that you work with, what steps would you say you've taken or you took to actually build positive relationships? So I'll start with you, Carmen.
Okay, cool. So I remember from my first internship, what my manager did. He said one-on-one meetings with different people in my company. It's more like close colleagues, and then when I went back for my placement, I get to kind of have the same one-on-ones but with other people to meet more people, right? But in a more professional, from a professional perspective, right? But otherwise, I've tried to participate in any kind of activities work organized, because they have the happy hours. We go to certain like car festivals thing where like enthusiasts from work they go there. But I thought, don't really know many things about cars. Should I go? Should I not go? I went anyway, and I kind of stick with the people that knew things about cars, and I asked questions like. Just ask them like, oh, what's that engine do? And then they tell you, and then you're getting curious. And that's how I kind of try to know the person I'm working with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're just getting stuck in, which is great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Gabby?
So for my placement and also my 2 graduate roles, when I first joined the company, I definitely felt like, okay, I need to get to know everybody. But that's quite overwhelming when you first start. So what I did was I asked my manager which stakeholders would I need to talk to, who are the key players in the company that I'll be working with and I need to sort of form relationships with. So that happened across the whole of my placement year and as well in my graduate role. Now I still am doing those introductions with meetings with various stakeholders, and then also, of course, off-site events as well is a great place to network and develop further relationships. I would say also try different techniques, because everybody's very different. They're not going to want to network in the same way. Some people really love on-site coffee catch-ups, and other people prefer maybe just not many catch-ups, just a few here and there. So really gauge who your audience is and how you can develop. And I think something that I've learned now is that the people who you most connect with will sort of gravitate towards yourself and you'll gravitate towards them. So whilst, yes, you want to get to know everybody in the company when you start, make sure that you also keep in mind that you will also gravitate towards certain types of people who will enable you and make you feel more powerful and your true self at work. So really invest in those people, because they're going to help you really survive in the workplace and make it a better experience for yourself.
Thank you. Just pass over to okay.
I think for myself it's come very naturally. So when I was in my internship, my role required me to work with my users, because I did like second line support. So I'm working directly with users that have like got issues with their laptop or the printer. So I think I built my confidence by just putting myself out there. It's like, I need to speak to you or I'm not doing my job really. So I think I built that rapport with all of my users there, and having that sort of confidence now has like led me on to like making that rapport with my customers and, you know, working with different teams. It's like, I need to speak to product management, I need to speak to account management. So I think it's just come with the role that I need to speak with different teams, and now I'm getting to know like, okay, what does product management do? How does that sort of team work and stuff like that? So I think for myself, it's just being part of my role that I need to network with everyone, and that way I've learned about different roles and different interests as well.
Yeah, I like what you said about the building a rapport and having those small talks and just really kind of, and also what you mentioned about everyone's networking is a bit different. Some people just want to meet for coffee, some just want the once in, I don't know, a month or so. But it's important to read a room and just kind of know what people prefer. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences. Maybe we'll start with you. You've got the mic.
Hi. I had a slightly different view of building positive relationship with my colleagues, because I looked at it from three perspectives. First one was, which I got the advice from my mentor, because at first, when I got into the company, due to the flat-out structure, I struggled with fostering relationships with higher-ups and different measure of people due to culture and clash of personality, like she mentioned. So I used this three kind of perspectives to foster my relationships. So the first one was like, make the intention to foster a relationship with people that you need help from. So if you're sorry.
No, please, you're doing really well.
You write it different because it's coming across different. Sorry, I fostered my relationship with intent, a positive relationship with intent for different groups of people, which I put into three categories, sorry. So the categories of people that you need help from. So, for example, people that are above you that have experience and they're in the career path you want to go to. So you foster a relationship with them because you want to break through a certain part of the industry and so on. Second one was people that are on the same level as you. Foster a relationship with them because you want to grow with them. That means you share ideas, you bounce off each other. So for me, it was my peer that we started grad scheme together, or people that are slightly above me, but again, we are still technically on the same level. And the next part was people that are coming into the company that are below me, that are feeling the same fear as I am, but your skills, you might not think it's a lot, but it's a lot for them because they are still starting off and they are going to feel the imposter syndrome that you faced previously. So as you be of help to them and sharing ideas with them and being that pillar of higher power for them as well. So that's how I approached it. So every time I approach a new individual, I'm like, oh, where do they fall into? It kind of helped me ease into what kind of, I will not say personality, but what kind of approach do I use towards them, and how do I speak to them? Do I use more friendly tone, or do I use more respectful tone, or do I see them as my younger one that I would want to, give a ladder to? So yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And last but not least.
Yeah, I think I really agree with Favour as well. I think, developing relationships with people from like different levels of the team is really important. So like developing relationships with people you can help as well as grow with, as well as learn from as well. So like developing relationships with people from all like levels of the organization is really important. And for example, like if you develop relationships with more senior people, you can learn skills from them. So like if you want to learn, for example, tracking or like like analytics or so many different things, you can ask them. You can once you have that relationship, you can ask them, let's have like a 1 hour session, let's go over this skill, can you teach me how to do this? And that way you can really learn from people. But again, like as Destiny said, Favour said, just developing a relationship with like different levels of the organization would really open up doors for you, and that's really important. And I would also say that at work it's not always serious as well. It's not always like, okay, let's get the work done and that kind of stuff. It can also have banter as well. You can always have a good time, talk about life, talk about different things like your interests. So it's not always serious. You can always have fun as well.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. So basically, the positive relationships are people that can really kind of mentor you and really teach you things and help you throughout your journey. And you kind of focus on those relationships. What I'm hearing from all of you is you're really proactive in really kind of knowing who you want to kind of have that relationship with. The workplace is one of those places where you can really build really positive relationships that can really last and really kind of help your career. I had mentors throughout my career, and so I actually would proactively seek people out that I can learn from. I just love learning from people. I can sit with somebody and just learn from them. I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and I just sat and I just listened to what he was saying. Just learning from people. If you have that mindset of when you're forging relationships, to learn from people is so important. So thank you. So before we close the session and we go to the audience and ask questions, are there any sort of resources you want to that you might think might be useful, that you might want to share? Any kind of resources that you...
For me, like you said, mentoring.
Okay.
I would say getting a mentor is your best resource. I will not lie to you, because to get to where I am now, without a mentor, I would not have reached this space. Because my mentor has been in the industry for 30 years. She gave me so much ideas. For example, read this book, you gain ideas in how to negotiate your salary, how to impress your employer, how to navigate your workforce. Because for me, when I had that fears and I realized, I don't know how to talk to my boss, I went to my mentor and she was like, do this, do that. She gave me a navigation route which opened so many doors for me. So which is why I'm strongly in favour of mentoring. Collect that mentorship card. You're going to have a mentoring from uni, from work number 1, not work number 2, and they'll kind of have a similar idea, but they'll have different mindset that would help you navigate. And I'll say read books, but that's too cliche. But if a mentor tells you to read a certain book, I'll say read it because it gives you so much ideas. I hate reading, so I do audio book as well. So I'll say reading and doing a bit of research kind of helped me. So that's my experience.
Thank you. So mentoring. Anyone else?
I would also say LinkedIn as well. So like LinkedIn Learning, as well as certifications for whichever industry you want to get into, whichever field. You can search in like certifications for computer science or certifications for marketing or whatever industry you want to get into. That would really help you stand out on your CV and to employers as well when you apply for jobs. And another reason for LinkedIn is because you can connect with a lot of people. You can connect with different employees, business owners, entrepreneurs, as well as like recruitment consultants as well. So like you can connect with like people who are actually like hiring people, for example. So LinkedIn would be another one. I think inside events like, for example, mentoring. There's Standard Chartered, who have like a Future Makers program, and they assign you like a mentor within their company, and they can guide you as well. Also, the alumni service here, you can even like just email them, and you can ask them, can I have a mentor from a specific field, and you can have like a one-off session with them. That's what I did. For example, when I started my role, I emailed the alumni service asking for like a mentor from the marketing field. They actually, sourced a mentor for me, and she really helped me in that role. We connected and we had like a 1-hour session. She gave me like different links to go on to learn and whatnot. So the alumni service is another one if you want to have like a mentor. And I think just being proactive as well, like just always learning.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So I think we're hearing on this side, mentoring, get a mentor, which is so important. And obviously the mentoring program here at Westminster is so rich, and the work that they put into it is just so, it's a resource for you, and you have to take chances and use that resource. What about you over here?
It's for free as well.
It's for free, exactly. So.
I'm a bit of an ambassador for University of Westminster because I absolutely loved all of the services, so I can't talk about it enough really. So when I was a student, I was on the mentoring scheme every single year, and I was on the placement year, so I also had a mentor during then. So if you are able to get yourself onto that mentoring cycle, that would be really great because you can network, ask questions. And then the second of which is the Ask a Mentor service, which I also still use to this day as a alumni. So one-off conversations, and you can build your network there and then have them on LinkedIn. There's just so many resources, so I definitely take a look at competition societies, extra roles that you can take. I did jobs as well whilst I was a student here to do with marketing. So lots of things that you can add to your CV so that it makes you a better candidate when you go for those graduate roles. And then once you are in the job, internal learning as well as external learning. So reading around your industry and understanding what's happening is really key. So keeping up to date. I'm sure you're all from very different types of degrees and will be very different industries as well. So for myself, I kind of cross over from business to marketing and understanding what's happening at the moment and how I can bring value, how my ideas can help in the workplace as well. So those are a few of my suggestions.
Thank you. Anything to add?
Yeah, sure. I would say the talent bank, I think, was here when I was at university, so obviously getting a part-time job is always handy, even though it's might not be related to what you're doing. It's still like those soft skills that you will build, which will help you lead on to like the job that you want. And obviously the mentoring program, I also joined that program when I started, just to get insight of like, what is it like in the industry, asking those questions. And now I'm a mentor myself, so I'm giving back to the university. So yeah.
That's great. That's great.
What I want to say is not necessarily a resource, but more of an idea that we talked a lot about work and like to perform well and to impress people and progress, and how do we deal with when we are at work. And I think something that helped me a lot was just maybe focusing after work on a hobby that I had, because it gave me the refresh for the next day to kind of be motivated. I went through a period where I wasn't as motivated at work as I wanted to, so nothing I could do would change the situation at work. So I focused on my free time and focus on my interests outside work to kind of gain that motivation, and I brought that motivation to work the next day, and it helped me kind of push through that period.
Yeah, that's a really, really important point. Thank you for raising that. I think that's sort of self-care and doing what you love and spending your weekends and just really detaching from work. That's so true. I completely agree with you. Thank you for bringing that up. So before we go to the audience, so thank you all of you for your insights and sharing your experiences with all of us. So we're going to go for some questions. I think we're probably 7 minutes over, but we're going to go for some questions in the room. So if you have any questions, please raise your hands. I've got 3 here, but if there's any questions, please raise your hands. We've got one over there.
So I've got 2 questions. The first one is, what are the common mistakes to avoid in the workplace? And number 2 is, how do I deal with a difficult boss or colleagues at work?
Anyone wants to answer that from your experience? And I can weigh in at the end.
I would say,
So did you hear the question? You didn't hear it? Okay.
I think one was, common mistakes in the workplace, and then the other one was like difficult colleagues maybe.
Yes, if I've got, how do I deal with a difficult boss or colleague?
Okay, interesting question. I would say that whenever you start a job, there's never a common mistake. You will always make mistakes. That's natural to make mistakes, but it's how you're gonna learn from that mistake, which will then add value. So that's the only way you would sort of learn and develop yourself. So make those mistakes, because that's how you become a better person, by making those mistakes. And a difficult boss is a tricky one. But I would say you might need to just sort of navigate around that situation. What are you finding difficult about that individual, if it's a boss or your colleague? And how can you maybe take a different approach about, asking if it's something you want to do, if it's about a raise or whatever it could be. Maybe try and sort of take a different route about it and go from there. That's my idea.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to add anything?
For the difficult boss, I think as hard as it is, maybe sometimes you can't really change that relationship, and kind of taking the courage to say, this is not a place for me, I'm just going to try to look somewhere else. See if that's possible.
Okay. Anyone else want to add? We've got Mike here.
I agree with her. I was going to say exactly the same thing with the difficult boss or colleague. With the colleague one, I think it's easier to handle. Talk to your boss, talk to your higher up, or gather evidence. I'll say keep reports or keep documentation of what's going on, and then if you feel we have enough information, you can then pass on to HR. That's what I know from my mentor, but I've not encountered any so far, thank goodness. With a difficult boss, it depends on how higher up they are. If they're pretty high up and you feel like you can't do much, I would say then that's probably the end of your journey with you and the company. However, if you feel like you have enough power to, speak to them and say again, handle it with saying we have a colleague and provide as much information as I can, and also cover your back as well. With the common mistakes one, like he said, you're always going to be making mistakes, but for me, my common mistake is keeping my mouth shut, or not being able to be as vocal as I would like to be, or just being like, okay, maybe I shouldn't speak, or I should only speak when spoken to. If you feel like you're going through that, I feel like one-to-one is very important. Speak to someone that you feel like you're comfortable speaking to, or that can make an impact on your behalf if you're a very quiet person. If you have a very extroverted individual that's a friend that can speak up for you, utilize that to your advantage, because that can help out a lot. Another one is with documentation for me. So for me, in my work, I made quite a couple of mistakes, like a lot of errors. And for me, I panicked sort of like do I just keep silent, or do I own up to my mistake? And I learned that accountability is very important within the company, because accountability, personally for you,
helps you grow as an individual, and also for the company helps them fix the mistake right before it escalates to something bigger, because you keeping your mouth closed would not help. So yeah, that's my main two.
I think just to add on mistakes as well, you can ask your colleagues or you can ask your mentors on like what mistakes to avoid. So you can ask that key question on like what mistakes to avoid, and that way, you know, for that specific role, for example, you can like understand what to do and what not to do as well.
Thank you. Just to kind of add to that, from somebody myself who manages, from a manager perspective, we have observations. So we observe some of the things that people who are sort of young, junior employees. And one of the things that we typically observe, and I don't want to call it a mistake, is just the inability. Sometimes there's clearly work to be done with the communication skills and not keeping managers informed. And before you know, we're dealing with something a lot bigger. Just having that sort of courage to say, I'm struggling, I'm behind. And the sense that they sort of shrink back and they want to ask questions because they're scared that they might feel like they don't know anything. So if you don't think about it as mistakes, you kind of think about it of just not having the awareness of what employees expect. So rather than thinking about it, if you think about your role, there's two things an employer look at. They look at your technical skills, what you can do, and the softer skills, how you get on with people. So those are the combination of what they look at, and they observe that. That's what you're measured against. So I think if you think about understanding what employers expect from you, and everyone here explaining their experience, and understand that, and just understand the culture of how things are done. But you don't want to kind of walk around thinking, am I making a mistake? But it's really kind of having an awareness. In terms of boss and your manager or having the difficulty, it comes down to those 3 C's I said at the beginning, and it's communication. And when you're having a disagreement on a change or a difference in view of somebody, you want to put yourself in their position. And listening is such an important skill. When you listen, you don't listen to respond. You want to understand from the person's perspective. So if you're having a boss or a manager that you're not getting along, ask yourself those 3 C's. Am I communicating clearly, confidently about what I know, etc.? And am I being calm? Because there's a perception that they have about you, and the only way you can change the perception is to put yourself in their shoes. Is listening. It's such a superpower. It's just listening. So maybe that's something you can take with you to see that in my career I've had to learn from not to be the kind of boss some of the bosses I've had before. So you learn from even not a great boss, you learn how not to be like them, but it's all part of learning. I hope that answers your question a little bit. Yeah, okay, cool. There's one over there.
I think my voice is...
Oh, okay, there's one here, actually.
Just like a question, never your comment. Communication, because communication is not just talking, it's also listening.
Yeah.
But my question would be, how do you keep calm?
Yeah.
I mean, how... this is, I mean, sometimes it's difficult, it's listening,
Yeah.
and you are silent, but sometimes, like,
Yeah.
God is all the doors, and you can no more keep silent.
Yeah.
So how did you manage all your experience, especially as a manager, because you have to lead this team, keep calm and giving instruction? You see,
Yeah.
without being, how we say, frustrated or nervous.
I get that question all the time. When everyone is in chaos, I'm just so calm and they can't understand why I'm calm. So I think it's come with years of experience, I would say. But if you think about yourself in that bubble called professional world, it's a bubble. And it's one of those bubbles where if you lose it, even if you're right, you will look wrong. So it's just thinking, I'm in this bubble, and it's called the professional world, and this is where I get my bread and butter. I have to just that calmness. So the calmness, and when you're listening, and you're responding to somebody that's making, I've been there, I really have been there, where you just see bubbling up. But in your inside, you're just thinking, this is a professional environment. When you're calm, your words become a lot calmer, because then the person on the other side, you just see them deflating because you're not matching that. Exactly. So when your tone, even if it's an email and you're writing an email and you're angry, don't send it. Put it in the draft. Don't send it. Go home, come back, and then send it. You will see that you would change so many different words. So I think it's kind of part of my personality. I'm very reserved anyway. But it's just understanding. I'm in this bubble, and it's a bubble. It's a professional world, and I need to be very calm because this is a professional environment. I can do whatever I like at home, but so it's just having that sense that it's listening to respond, not listening to react, because that's when it becomes really kind of messy. So I always say, always keep calm in the back of your mind when you communicate. Am I being calm here? And just being calm, because you're not in a rush. Just take your time and just say what you have to say. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
okay. Any more in the room? Because we have 3. Okay, there's one at the back.
Hi. So what I would like to ask about is basically work-life balance. So I just need a tiny bit of an advice. I recently started a new job in marketing, and I usually work way past my hours. It's something that my managers always discourage, but they themselves would do the same anyway. So it's just really hard for me not to follow suit. I also trying to keep in mind that this is my first job, and I might need to do more to kind of get better at what I'm doing in general. So yeah, I would just like to ask advice on that.
I'll respond and I'll give you guys a chance to talk over your experiences as well. So, as a manager, you have 2 different types of managers. As a manager, once you're in the role and you feel like you're new, you want to impress your boss, and that means for you, it means staying longer. It doesn't, for us who are the manager, we see it as somebody who is not managing their time. And it's not a positive thing. If your job finishes at 5 and you say to your manager, is there anything you need me to do just before I go home. Because it looks as though that you're trying to, you're extending your work hours when you don't have to, or you don't need to. Obviously, for every job, there's peaks and troughs where you're really busy and you're expected to be around. But if you think about it as, this is a job, and this is somewhere that I'm supposed to be certain hours, you don't feel the need to push yourself, unless you have a busy period where you feel like you need to. But from us as managers looking in, we tend to see that as maybe they're not managing their time well. So if you want to impress your boss, you want to do your hours and be productive, and come back the next day refreshed to do more. That's what would really impress your boss, as opposed to pushing yourself. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Maybe some of you might have something you want to say. I think, Gabby.
I have nothing. At first, when I started, I felt like there was so much work on my plate. So one thing I would say is speak to your manager, like even if they're working overtime, speak to them and be like, hey, how should I handle this? How should I handle this load of work? Because again, it might be a thing where they can delegate to someone else, or they can be like, okay, we can extend the work to a certain, we can give you extra deadline, because there is such thing as work burnout, and you don't want to reach that stage. And when you reach that stage, the work you love doing, or the overtime you're doing, you're not going to be able to do that. So it's like a marathon. You're going to be working for 30 years in the industry, probably less, it depends, but you have to pace yourself right. And by pacing yourself means by working, always having time to rest, socialize, be out of that work environment, and rejuvenating to get back again.
Okay, so I'm just conscious of time. Maybe Gabby has something to say. All right.
Well, I just add something because I've worked in marketing at Samsung, Sky, and Procter & Gamble, and they are huge companies, global companies, which are really dynamic. So I feel that because of the nature of what you've chosen to specialise in marketing, it is a really dynamic industry, and it's very different to some other types of industries which may have more kind of balance there, whereas whereas marketing can feel like you have to be on the ball all the time. There's projects happening, and you also, there's so many trends, and it's very fast paced, so you kind of have to work even harder. So I totally get what you mean in terms of elongating your hours and working as much as you can to get in as much work as you can, because in a way in marketing you do have to put in the work really early in your career, because it's such a fast-paced and dynamic environment, and there are so many people working in marketing at the moment, so you've got to build up your reputation and your skills there. So it will feel like a lot of sacrifice, but it will actually pay off in the long run. So just trust in the process. I know it's really difficult because I'm in the industry as well, and it's very challenging, and there are times, you know, when I feel that burnt-out feeling, but then I definitely take into consideration, and this is a quote which I've heard from so many companies so far, which is, we're not saving lives, we work in marketing, which means at the end of the day, you're not kind of saving any lives, you're selling consumer products or you're selling B2B products. So take that into consideration. When you need to take your self-care, definitely do that. If it's a weekend or if it's time out, do that. But yeah, go all in, but remember, work hard, play hard at the same time. So take your self-care as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So no questions in the room? No more? Okay, because we're slightly over time, so I want to go through some of the questions here. Do you want me to go through these questions or just one? Okay. So what's the biggest challenge you have overcome so far, and what have you learned from it? Was that for me or for... Who is the biggest challenge? Who wants to answer that one? I'm happy to answer that. Okay. So one of the biggest challenge, I think for me, one of the biggest challenge for me throughout my career is really kind of owning my own voice and being seen, and just to say that I'm here, I've got ideas. I think that's one of the things. At the beginning of my career, I really didn't have the confidence to really speak up. I would sit in meetings and just shrink and not say anything. So listening to all of you guys, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even do that. But it took time for me. So one of those challenges was to really own my own voice and to speak up. So that's one of the things. And I think it had nothing to do with the companies or whatever. It was just the fact that I just didn't feel I was confident enough to be able to do that. So I was able to kind of overcome that. All right, I think we can maybe just pause on the questions, and you can maybe come up to us afterwards. So thank you all so much, and thank you for all your questions. Just one last thing we want to say, just to make sure that if you have more questions, please come to us during networking, and then we'll try our best to answer your questions.